Good evening. My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are
the Dungeon
Dudes. Still quite haven't got it yet for when we're remote.
It's
almost there.
It's impossible when we're remote. Like, I don't know. Even when it sounds right, it's not right.
Yeah. But, that's timing, right? Timing is everything, as they say. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for our monthly Patreon Q&A sessions. This is where we take questions from our Patreon supporters that they have sent us over the past couple weeks for our kind of monthly Dungeon Masters Workshop. If you are joining us on YouTube through chat, feel free. You will be able to send us questions as well tonight, but we will be going through our Patreon questions first. We got we got a fair number of submissions this month, kind of about half and half between dungeon mastering questions and of course questions about Drakenheim. Why would we have so many questions about Drakenheim, Kelly?
It might be because we are just at the tail end of our first ever Kickstarter campaign, which is Dungeons of Drakenheim. We are turning our the first season of our live play campaign into an adventure module for everybody to play. And we're very excited. We only have a few days left. I think we're at like 4 days left in our Kickstarter, and
we're getting down to the wire.
Yeah,
we're I think there are exactly 78 hours remaining.
Oh man, but we are almost okay. So we've blown past almost all of our stretch goals, and we have blown past our initial goal, which was I think like 20,000 or something.
Yeah.
We hit that in 5 minutes, which is amazing. And yeah, we're pushing $1 million American. Now, Monty and I are Canadian, so we hit the $1 million Canadian a little while ago. And we celebrated that, but I can never have enough champagne, so I already have another bottle of champagne waiting for the $1 million American that we hopefully will hit before the end of this campaign.
And Kelly and I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our patrons, viewers, Twitch subscribers, and other supporters for coming out and backing this campaign. Suffice to say, we did not expect this.
No.
And all I can say for myself is I feel an overwhelming amount of gratitude to all of you out there that have supported the work that we have done over the years, whether it has been watching our YouTube guides, whether it has been watching our live streams, whether it has been interacting with us on social media or becoming a patron of our show and chatting with us on Discord, or if you've just discovered us and have backed us on Kickstarter. Thank you so much. We are so grateful and overwhelmed, and it's very hard for me to put into words just how grateful I am, because it feels it's very surreal and very magical. I would not have imagined this in my wildest dreams. So thanks to all of you out there, and a massive thank you as well to our amazing team at Ghostfire Games who are publishing and working through this on this project. Dungeons of Drakenheim has been forged with Ghostfire, and so the team from everyone at Ghostfire has been so amazing in their support for this project of putting this together, all the way from Jordan and Matt and Hannah, Marius, and Martin and Josh. There are at least a dozen other people who have been working behind the scenes in an amazing way. I almost feel bad because I don't have the list of everyone here in front of me to thank, but it's of course, and Jill and Joe as well, and our partners, Kirsten and Shay. There's so many people that have contributed to this in a very direct way that I want to show my gratitude and express for. And I hope that my kind of on the spot gratitude has not omitted anybody. If I left you out, you know how to contact me, so I'll thank you.
I also want to throw a big thank you to the Patreon community that we have. They have been so incredible for this Kickstarter. Not only were they some of the first people, a lot of them were the first group of people to jump on the Kickstarter and actually push it to succeed so quickly. but also if you don't know, we have a Patreon community, and our Patreon has an exclusive Discord. And in the Discord, we have a Kickstarter chat that has just blown up since the launch of this Kickstarter. And it's been so exciting to share sort of the growing news and accomplishments with everybody there. There's a lot of our Discord members are posting graphs and charts showing how we're doing, which, me not being the biggest numbers guy, it's been really fun to wake up every morning and have it laid out for me by our Discord members, and just people getting so hyped. And I think back to when Monty and I were starting not only Dungeon Dudes, but when we first were like, what if we turned on some cameras and actually played D&D? And we kind of made this decision, like, let's do 4 or 5 episodes and see if anybody watches. And now that has gone all the way to us publishing a book. And I remember when I was going to film school, I had this whole thing. I was a big fan of the show Lost when it was airing. And I remember watching Lost with my friends. And after every episode, we would get on a chat and be like, what do you think this is? What do you think this means? And we would speculate about the world and the characters and what was connected to what. And I said, man, I know I'm going to have made it when someday I make a show where people sit and speculate about what's going to happen next.
It's a crazy feeling.
And now here we are, and people, I love it. I love going online and reading about all the cool theories that people have. People speculate about my character and the world and all of these little bits and pieces that I get to create. And I don't know, I couldn't ask for anything better. And the Patreon community, the Discord community, but also just all of our subscribers, all of our fans, it's just been incredible. And to see where we are now, this book is kind of a statement of really a lot of accomplishments and a lot of people believing in us. And I really love that.
And I feel that, like, one of the most exciting things about this is, the success of the Kickstarter has allowed us to increase the scope of the project. With all the stretch goals we've made, we've been able to add a lot of content to the book that we weren't sure wasn't going to make it in, from new adventure sites, more magic items, more spells, and hopefully more monsters as well. This book's going to be a big thick boy when all is said and done. And I think one of the other things that I'm so excited about is the artwork that is pouring in, that we're starting to get. Our art director Marius has been working with some incredible artists and some amazing talent, and the success of the Kickstarter means that we have the budget to have really gorgeous art in this book. And just starting to see, of course, we've been able to share some of it so far. Our patrons have had a few art leaks as well as this has been coming in, and were it not for the amazing success of this Kickstarter, this caliber of artwork just would not have been possible. As I mentioned earlier, there is a huge number of people that are working on this book. It's not just Kelly and I kind of doing everything, because I can't use InDesign. I don't know how to lay out a book. If you've watched our videos, you've seen that there have been spelling errors in our videos, a lot of them. And so things like editors, our editors, and the distribution. Kelly and I know nothing about book printing, and despite all appearances, we actually don't know too much about marketing and social media either. So we've been able to have so much incredible support, and the success of this Kickstarter has allowed us to create something that is really to a high professional standard. And I think that that's one of the things that excites me most about this project is that it is one thing. It is very easy in this day and age to slap together a PDF in Word and throw it up online and see how it does. But it is another thing entirely to make a book that can sit on, that you're proud to have on your shelf, that stands up with the high quality of material that we see in production quality from the official 5th edition content. And so for me, the success of this Kickstarter means, we're making a book of that caliber. And to me, that is such a I'm so grateful for that, because it really being able to put the success of the project back into making a better product, I think is the coolest thing about Kickstarter for me.
Yeah. Now, we should get on to the questions, because also, in case those of you watching do not know, we are going to be streaming again on Friday for a wrap-up party. So same Draken time, same Draken channel. I'm going to use that from now on. So at Friday we'll be streaming again with a kind of closing off party, where we're probably going to reiterate a lot of what we just said, and we're just going to kind of be celebrating the success of the Kickstarter on Friday. Today, though, we're going to answer some questions. We're going to get into it. Now, I'd say about half of these questions are about Drakenheim, so be prepared for that. The other half are about just DMing in general, so be prepared for that as well.
I think we'll start with the DM stuff, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
But I like this question from Ark to kick things off, and I would love to hear what chat has to say about this question, actually. Kelly, what are your personal superstitions about your dice?
Okay. I have a superstition, which I actually broke during this last campaign, and it benefited me. So that's kind of weird that I broke this superstition and it worked out. But I do this thing where no matter how many dice I have, everybody knows you can never have enough dice. Every time that I play a new character, I go out and I buy a set of dice that the color or the feel of them or something about them speaks to the nature of the character I've created. And I have to use those dice for that character, whether good or bad. Those dice are the character's dice, and they define that character. So if they roll terribly, then that's just the fate of that character. Now, for the stream, I bought a set of Wilhelm dice, and I'm going to hold one of them up. This was my special Wilhelm dice. I now only use the D20 as a luck point dice, and I actually don't use the set anymore because they were rolling so horribly for me that I actually got a second set, which is this metal blue and kind of dark metal set, which has been rolling really well for me. It also came with a lot more dice in the set, and I ended up really liking it for sneak attack because it came with 4 D6s. So I did switch partway through the campaign, and these are now my Wilhelm dice. So I did betray my own superstition. But generally speaking, I will buy a new set for every character, and I will use that set through an entire campaign.
So I have a similar thing in that I have my DMing dice and I have my player dice, and never the twain shall meet. These two D20s, I have had these guys for a very, very long time.
I know them well.
Yes. And they have been... they've been the ruin of many a poor player character. And so these are the ones for DMing. But I have a lot of other sets for players, for when I play or just for when I travel. But like basically my superstition is that I don't travel with these ones. These ones always stay at home with me. So I have a traveling set that I bring with me because I never want to risk losing these dice. So I'll have other sets that I bring with me when I'm traveling to someone else's place or playing D&D elsewhere, whenever that happens again. My other dice superstition is you're only allowed to roll red dice for Fireball.
Oh, I have a set of like 20 red dice somewhere that are my Fireball dice.
So these are my Fireball dice. They have to be the red dice. That's just the rule. Oh, you gone blurry again, Kelly.
Oh no, it's happening.
Just put your thumb over it and let go. There you go. There you go. Yeah. So those are my Fireball dice, right? Yeah. And the other kind of like dice superstition that I've sort of started to develop is I like to have the right amount of damage dice for all the spells. So like I've kind of made it so that I have like a good number of D4s and a good number of D8s for like I like having the D8 so that like I can roll like, I don't know, blight or weird things like that. I'm kind of into the idea of like color coding the dice around spells and stuff like that. So my dice tray is getting very crowded with lots of different little bits and bobs in here. The other thing is I don't share my dice. I have a grab bag of dice for sharing.
This is my share bag.
Yeah. Don't touch my dice. I roll my dice, just me. I roll them, not you. Don't touch my dice.
Yeah, my dice tray has, I think, about 4 sets of dice in it. I don't know if I can do this without them spilling everywhere, but my dice tray has like 4 sets in it, and those are like my dice. They're mine and nobody else touches them. And then I have this bag of like 1,000 dice that I let other people touch.
Yeah, and I guess my only other dice superstition is it's not, you don't have bad luck, you just have confirmation bias. So like I think that my only challenge is that if you actually think you roll dice badly, the next time you play, write down the results of every time you roll the dice, and not just like for every attack roll, every ability check, everything. And if you roll your dice just because you're like me and you roll dice just because you're like, you have a tick or whatever, record those too. And I'm pretty certain that that unless your dice have like a serious manufacturing error, that if you actually log that data, you will find that your dice are pretty average. Beyond that, I don't believe in dice luck. I think that the math rocks are pretty impartial unless they're cheater math rocks.
I don't believe you. My Wilhelm dice failed me so hard, and now my new set doesn't. So
yeah,
whatever.
But there's also that phrase that my old boss, I used to work in technical theater, and I did some stage carpentry, and my old boss used to say, it's a poor carpenter that blames their tools. Right. So yeah.
So you're saying I'm a bad player. I get it. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
I'm just saying that, like, you know, don't blame the dice.
I always, like, who else am I going to blame? Myself? No. Moving on. So let's get into some of these dungeon mastering questions. So yeah, Parker asks, how do I deal with my party talking to many NPCs at the same time? With many times the NPCs having logical reasons to talk to one another instead of addressing the party. This is what Monty and I call the game of ping pong that you have to play. You have to turn it into a game of ping pong. Despite the fact that your NPCs probably have every reason in the world to talk to each other, I never let it go more than 1-to-1. So let's say you have 8 NPCs. One NPC might turn to the other NPC and say, like, what do you think of that? And the other NPC, you then switch gears. Well, I don't know if that's a good idea, but then you immediately have to throw it back to the party. You never want to do more than 2 NPCs at a time. If you can, you probably only want 1 NPC at a time. But if you have to, it can be 1-to-1, then back to the party. Then the party says something else, and then a different NPC picks it up. And you play this game of ping pong where you constantly have to and like, it's pretty easy. You can always just go with, what do you think, party? Yeah. Like, here's an idea. What do you guys think? Well, we don't know. And then the party says their stuff, and then a new NPC will pick it up. Monty, if you have anything to add.
I think this is one of those cases where the in-universe logic has to take a back seat to the meta logic of the play experience. Even though the NPCs would have good reason to talk amongst each other in the situation, you really got to minimize it. Like, as an example, pay attention the next time you replay like Fallout 4 or a Bethesda RPG where you have dialogue trees. it's very rare that you get the cutscenes where the NPCs are talking to each other. And of course, in a video game, it's entertaining because it can be a bit of a cutscene sort of thing. But you really want to push it back to the player. So if it is a situation where the NPCs are having a debate amongst each other, you might want to just summarize the key points of that debate and maybe write down in advance the main thing that each NPC wants to say. So one of the things that you could say is, let's say you've got 5 NPCs, you know, that are a rival adventuring party is talking to your players and they're all arguing over a situation. And the fighter so you could actually summarize it by saying, well, the fighter says that they want to go to the troll's lair, but the cleric says that they want to go to the ruined temple, and the rogue says that they want to explore the sewers, and the wizard wants to explore the old mage's tower, and the bard just wants to go drink in the tavern. So you summarized what all 5 of those people said, and you gave the important thing, and then you give the opportunity for the party to ask more questions, right? So that's one of those things where you just have to manage your flow of information, because it's awkward to talk to yourself even when you are running multiple NPCs, and B, it just unless you are a really good storyteller and have, like, the only way to make it work otherwise is for you to be a really good storyteller, to understand the flow of conversation, and to probably adopt some voices and have some pretty good pre-written dialogue. So that it's a careful thing to manage. And what I would my number one suggestion would be is, even though it's logical for your NPCs to talk to one another, try to divest yourself of that thought and break that up into chunks so that the NPCs are talking to each other less and they're talking to the players more.
I also, so when I ran Tyranny of Dragons, and in Rise of Tiamat, there's the council meetings that happen every few sessions. And during the council meetings, I would like just kind of roll over, like the party would present something and there was differing opinions in the factions. And I would even say, like, so-and-so and so-and-so burst into like angry yelling at the other side of the room where so-and-so and so-and-so are trying to defend. So like I would kind of cover that, and then one of the members would stand up and be like, silence, and then they would deliver the next thing. But I would kind of iterate how everybody in the room was feeling about what was happening, but I wouldn't do full dialogue. It would be, these people are okay with it, these people are upset at that choice, these people are kind of middle ground, and you can hear whispers, murmurs, and yelling amongst the whole group. And then one person from the council stands up and demands attention, and that's when I start dialogue again. So these kind of little cues and little ways to summarize can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah, so Sam C asks, for both of the dudes, what is your ideal BBEG for Dungeons and Dragons? Could be a monster or a class/NPC. I know my answer. Monty, do you have yours?
What's your answer?
So, oddly enough, I really like having, I won't say human, but humanoid big bad evil guys. I like maybe if they are summoning a monster or a demon lord or Tiamat or, you know, something, that's cool. But I always want there to be a humanoid character behind all of the evil. I'm not as big into like, oh, the Tarrasca's rising from the sea and will doom us all, and that's our main villain. I think it's much more interesting to play with the dynamics and the politics and the mindsets of a humanoid character. When I'm using the term humanoid because, like, could be an elf, could be an undead, a lich, but like some sort of thinking, sentient, knowledgeable person who has made some decisions in their lifetime that are not for the betterment of the world and are maybe driving something that they believe is the right thing. That's always my favorite thing to play with. A bad guy who believes they're doing the right thing but it doesn't look that way from the heroic side. And that's my favorite thing to play with. So I always look for like a lich or an evil wizard is probably top of my list.
I'm going to say for me, the best villain is the one that the players made for themselves.
All right. Yeah.
Right. It's the villain that became the villain because of the player's actions. And often that intersects with everything that you said, right, as well, Kelly, is that usually means it's a humanoid person. Yeah. I think that going into like classes, I will say the one I think is the least interesting is the classic evil god. I think that the evil god is probably what I would consider the D tier of fantasy villains. I find it profoundly unsatisfying for the evil god. It's the demon lord is like a step above that, and then I would say like a dragon or a lich is better. A fae is even better than that, and yeah, a straight up mortal, an ambitious mortal is probably the best type of a villain, especially one that wasn't necessarily a villain to begin to begin with. I just think that like for me that would be kind of like my hierarchy, with the only kind of wild card in there would be like something like a more Lovecraftian god.
Yeah.
But I don't really tend to think of those things as villains because they don't think like they're beyond good and evil, and they're beyond sort of any sort of like conflict that mortals care about.
Well, what's really interesting is when we talk about a BBEG, for me, the BBEG doesn't even need to be the final boss. If anybody out there doesn't know what BBEG is, it's big bad evil guy. So your main villain doesn't need to be the final boss. And actually, what I love about, again, the humanoid villain is that they may have gotten in way over their heads with a god or with a demon lord. Or like that Lovecraftian monster. It's like an evil warlock has made a pact and is summoning an entity into our world. Okay, spoilers here for Rise of Tiamat. I'm going to try to be as like not spoilery as I can. But for me, the main villain of Rise of Tiamat was not Tiamat. It was the evil wizard summoning Tiamat. Whether or not you fought Tiamat at the end of the campaign was the byproduct of the success or failure of the main villain.
Yeah.
And Tiamat was way scarier. And when I ran it, they did fight Tiamat, and it was the big final battle. And actually, the kind of hubris of the main villain was the way that I ran it. He was standing there thinking that Tiamat would arise and be like, "Oh, thank you, Great One, for worshiping me." But instead, Tiamat popped out of the portal and immediately ate my main villain. They were already fighting him, and he was down to low hit points. And in his final moments, he was like, she rises, and then he gets eaten. Yeah. And it was just to show, like, this guy was an idiot the entire time. He did not know the toys that he was playing with. Yeah, and I love that model.
Yeah. I think as well, I would say look to Disney villains because they're actually really good. Like most Disney villains, like Gaston or Ursula or oh my God, what's the villain from
Scar?
Scar, obviously, yeah. Scar is like a masterclass in a great villain. But also from The Princess and the Frog, he sings that "I've got friends on the other side." Phenomenal villain.
That's like I've never seen Princess and the Frog. I'm sorry.
But I would say that, like, you know, Scar, Ursula, Gaston, they're way up there, and so it's actually worth, I think, watching Disney movies for a masterclass on villainy.
The thing about D&D villains is you're allowed to be tropey with them, and I actually think Scar, like, if you watch The Lion King, Scar's motives, Scar's betrayals, Scar's, like, everything about Scar is like such an icon for a villain. I mean, if you can work the song that he sings to the hyenas into your game, go for it.
Oh yeah, yeah,
but
right. Complete with its goose stepping hyenas.
yes, yeah. There's a lot of icons, and there's a lot of parallels to be drawn there that are really interesting. But Scar's brilliant. He's one of my favorite tropey villains that you can be like, man, this is such a textbook villain, but steal it.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's because Jeremy Irons is voicing that character, and also because fundamentally, the story of the Lion King borrows quite heavily. It's basically a reskinned, not. It's either Hamlet. It's not Hamlet though. It isn't Hamlet. It's but it kind of is a reskin Hamlet, but it's also, I'm losing with the other Shakespeare one that it's really close to. It's really close to a reskinned one of the Henrys, I think. It like in terms of the way that it works out. Obviously it doesn't have as much of the bad, everyone dies in the end of Hamlet, but it's pretty close. Because Lion King is Hamlet because Timon and Pumbaa are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and Zazu is Polonius, and the characters map out, except of course in this one, Simba doesn't kill Zazu, and then Nala doesn't kill herself. So and then Simba lives in the end.
Well, it's the Disney version of Macbeth. Yeah.
Actually, no. Exocom said in the comments, it's also Richard III. It's right. That's what it is. Yeah, because Scar is, and of course Richard III is. I can't believe I forgot that because
you forgot to say Hamlet spoilers. By the way, chat's saying that. If you're being spoiled on Hamlet, you're
being spoiled on Hamlet,
years late.
Yeah, you're about 400 years late to the party, right? So no, actually, thanks for bringing up Richard III, Exocom, because it is Richard. I think it's much more accurate to say that it's Richard III, with the way that it all kind of shapes out, because the exiled heir comes back and reclaims the kingdom. So.
Do you guys want to talk about Shakespeare some more? Do you want to?
Hey, I'm a PhD candidate in drama, theater, and performance
I know
studies.
You are.
I can talk about Shakespeare for a very long time.
My beginning of getting into film was actually started off as me wanting to be an actor, and I acted in 3 Shakespearean plays. Hey, everybody out there, I played Romeo once in Romeo and Juliet. It was when I was only 17, but that was fun. I also played Dimitri in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was my second favorite role to play. Both of those were a blast. I also played Shylock, which anyway, moving on to the next question. Have you ever played a time travel adventure in an ongoing campaign? What should you watch out for as a DM when you are planning such an adventure? I can tell you, so this may not be the answer you're looking for. Our time travel campaign that we did run was a very specific type of time travel, and that is being stuck in a time loop. If you're talking about time travel where the players blast back to the past to solve a problem that they just experienced or something like that, not quite what we were going for. In our campaign, players arrived in a city. The city explodes into chaotic, demonic horribleness, and everybody dies. And then they woke up 3 days later in the inn that they stayed in when they first arrived in town, and they cannot leave the city. And they had to keep stringing together events and trying to solve the mystery of why this was happening. And with that, I think Monty's going to have a lot more to say than I did because he ran the campaign. But I will say that what was really important is that the eventual answer to the mystery was something that could be solved and pieced together. But getting there involved several days of putting together clues and riddles and puzzles. And I think that if you are doing a time travel campaign, you want the ending to be elusive enough, but important enough that when the players get thrown back, it's not obvious where their path is. And then you have a campaign. Then they have to start the work of figuring out how the heck do we get from where we are now to what we saw happen. And that's the important key.
Yeah, the way that I structured my time loop campaign was I wrote a timeline of events. Like I actually had it was like a 5-page Google Doc that was like day 1, day 2, day 3. And then it was like this time on this day, this event happens. And it was really cool to make it, right? And then what I was able to do with that was like I knew as a DM how messing with certain things would change things, and I could always leave notes that like that were kind of like, if this doesn't happen, then they do this, right? And so it taught me as a DM how to make villains and how to make antagonists that respond dynamically when their plans turn sideways. And ultimately, the kind of the conditional thing that was necessary at the end was like the way that I orchestrated it was that like several magic items were needed to solve the problem. So the first kind of part was like actually like locating the information and finding out where these were. And then so the final leg of the campaign ended up with where the players had to figure out a plan of like, how are we going to collect all these magic items in a 24-hour period so we can do all the things that we need to do with them in the right order, which was, it was kind of cool. It was a very much of a puzzle sort of campaign. If you're going to do a more traditional time travel campaign, I would watch a lot of Doctor Who and just like not worry about it. Like take a page out of Doctor Who and just go, it's timey-wimey, like mumbo jumbo, like, because otherwise you're gonna have to make the rules for how time works, and you're gonna have to make sure you're really consistent about it. So if you're going with Doctor Who, you can kind of just be like, hand wave it and just have fun with it, and don't worry about your player. Like, the most important thing to remember in a time loop campaign is that unlike other media where your players can go back in time and re-watch things, in a D&D game, your players can't go back and re-watch or replay the prior sessions of your campaign. So you can rely on the fact that your players are probably going to forget stuff. And so hopefully that doesn't come back to bite you.
Next up, the charismatic Enigma asks, as a DM, how often should your players feel like combat has a very real chance of a player death? My answer for this, it's not really a set answer, but when your player characters first level up, I like to hand them some combat encounters where there's not really a major threat of death because they just leveled up. And I like the player characters to get a chance to feel like their new powers. They get to try out their new powers and new abilities or new feats. And they get to beat the heck out of the bad guys. After a session where they are like, oh man, these new powers are great. Maybe it takes a session or two. Then by the third session, sometimes the second session, but definitely by the third session, then I up the ante and I start posing combat encounters that pose a much higher threat. And then usually it always builds up to some sort of climactic battle where there is a major threat that I try to put on my players.
I think the difficulty with answering this question is it an absolute chance regardless of how well your players play, or is it dependent on how well they play? Because I would say that if your players are not playing well, then their odds that they're going to die increase. And if they are playing well, then the odds that they and making good decisions don't. But also, like, you know, you do have to factor it in. If your typical game night has 3 combat encounters, which is kind of lowballing it maybe, but let's just go with 3. And let's just say that your average combat encounter has a 5% chance of a player character dying. Well, that means that approximately once every 7 game sessions, you should have a player character die. So, like on paper, a 5% chance, that seems really, really low. But a campaign where a player character dies, like, do you want there to be a death every game session? Do you want there to be a death every other game session? Do you want there to be a death once every 4 game sessions? So I think it's actually more about answering that question for yourself, is how many player characters are going to die over the course of this campaign, and what do you like, do you have a target number? And this isn't like necessarily planning to kill your players. This is just saying, like, how frequent do you want character death to be a thing that happens in your game? If you want character death to be frequent, then, you know, just go wild and up the, like, don't worry about it, right? Yeah. And if you don't want it to be frequent, then pull back. Right. It's a very, very tricky thing to calibrate, because, again, Dungeons and Dragons isn't like a video game. You can't really capture the feeling of playing Dark Souls or XCOM or Darkest Dungeon in D&D, because it's not a video game. And there isn't like a save and reload, or there really is, like, it just, the gameplay turnaround isn't as quick as a video game is, right? Like in XCOM, if you're, you know, the worst thing that can happen to you in XCOM if your party wipes is your gameplay is done and you start the campaign over again, right? Whereas that's not what happens in D&D. If your party wipes, like, it's not like you just start the campaign over again and try again. Usually a total party kill in D&D means, well, this campaign is over and now all the work that you did is gone. So you kind of have to balance that out. It's a very difficult question to answer, actually. Yeah, and I do think that there's a really fine balance that every DM needs to work on. Like, I never strive for, I mean, I always throw difficult encounters at my players, because oftentimes my players trounce over difficult encounters. But also, I try to ride that line where if 2 to 3 bad choices happen in a row, now there's a problem, and now they're looking at a possible character death. One of the only times I killed a character in my campaigns, it's happened, I think, three times. But the one that I always remember was an aerial battle where they were on the back of a silver dragon, and they were being chased by a green dragon and a few cultists on wyverns. And one of my player characters jumped off of the dragon onto a wyvern and was flying it, and then flew right at the green dragon and tried to fight it one-on-one, while the rest of the party was trying to get further away from the green dragon. And the green dragon ate that player character, and it was like, well, like, even when he died, he was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have just flown back to fight it one-on-one. That was a bad idea. And, like, it's moments like that where I, as a DM, have to say, the choices that were just made, I'm not holding back. Like, there's no punches being pulled now. This dragon's going to go all out on you because you are trying to attack it head on. There you go. And that's how it works. And that's kind of the way that it goes, is like, there have been a couple times, even in our Drakenheim shows, where I've gone, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, remember the Hydra a few weeks ago, God, Kelly? Man, that, yeah. And even most recently, when Jill was surrounded by werewolves, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, because this was not executed well, and this is appropriate because this was not thought out on the player's end. And so for me, it's always about, like, when do you go, okay, this is fair, like, and that's when because you can always beat your players at a war game, right? And, like, I played a lot of war games as well, and, like, even if my goal was to, like, defeat my players, I'm reasonably confident that I could do that. But I like the feeling of them having to come up with an ingenious solution to survive. It's a very pulp hero sort of thing, like a pulp action novel sort of feeling, where a pulp novel, you always get this feeling that protagonists, you're like, how are they going to get out of this? And then they do, but then immediately it's like out of the frying pan and into the fire. And I love that feeling. It's action packed. It's great. So for me, it's more about the feeling of death than the actuality of killing the players. It's more important that they feel that there's a threat. And part of the threat being there is that, you have to be willing to do it if they don't come up with a way to get out of it.
And I also do like that as a DM, Monty, you look for, like, when you lay down you could die right now, but the party then comes together to do something, like the Hydra situation, then you reward that effort. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important as well, because dying sucks, and it's more fun to feel like you're going to die and then not, than it is to actually die. That goes for real life as well. Moving on, I like this question. This is from Quarantined. How do you hand out loot from monsters? I understand that a humanoid might have a +1 sword, but how, thematically, do you do this when you might have an adventure set in an all-jungle world filled with beasts, for example?
I have a few ideas about this.
I also have a few ideas. Do you want to go first?
I think that with an all-jungle world, you have a crafting system. And you take the trophies from your beasts, and your players take them back and craft cool stuff.
Oh, like a blade made of the bones of the here's another one for you. Another adventurer got eaten by the monster.
Yep. And of course, you can always have your ancient civilization that was once there, and your players can find mysterious ruins that they don't understand of that ancient civilization.
Yes, that was another big one for me, is like there are ancient relics lost in this jungle, and like, you're fighting dinosaurs in Chult, and then you stumble upon an ancient ruin that has a mythical sword that was long lost, and nobody has gone looking for it because there's a T-Rex that throws up zombies.
Magic plants and fae. You could have magical fruits and berries on rare trees that recreate the effects of potions.
Brilliant.
Right. And you could have fae creatures, and you could have elemental creatures that cross through, and those elemental creatures bring magic items with them.
This is where we also get into, I think that the lesson that we're tiptoeing around here is about reflavoring. We've talked about this a lot, but you don't have to use the exact imagery of the magic items in the book. You can adapt them. A potion could be an edible berry. A sword could be a magical tree that you find a branch from and like carve into a blade or a spear.
Yep. You could wear the hardened carapace of like a giant ant as armor.
Yeah, I love that. Like you find the pelt of you fight a mythological like ancient wolf creature, and you take its pelt, and it's like a cloak of protection.
Yeah. You could also have magic. So you could have things that are magical in the world, in the geography of the world, that player characters can. Okay, so like remember, like with Achilles was dipped in the river Styx and became invulnerable. So you could have a magical wellspring that once every 50 years, the first person who enters it gets a +1 bonus to their AC, as if it was magic armor. Or you could have like magical pollen, like you could have a rare like, like a black lotus or something that is the same as one of the that you can eat, and it's the same as like one of the tomes that gives you a +2 bonus to one of your ability scores, right? So you can just have the flora and fauna have the magic in it.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question, but reflavoring, like no matter what your setting is, I love looking at the magic items and thinking, what would this magic item feel like in this setting? and then you come up with a cool description. And I mean, also I think back to like my favorite Legend of Zelda moments, where who's to say there's not just an ancient sword in a stone in the middle of a mythical woods that a person can draw, and now they're the chosen hero. You know, that's cool.
Yeah.
Aaron, aka Reaper Zero, asks, "Can't wait for the Dungeons of Drakenheim, but what tips and tricks, if any, can I use to balance combat encounters for an unexperienced party, especially as a first-time DM?" This is tough because CR is not as helpful as we all wish it was. So balancing for a party, I'm gonna say mine. I'm sure Monty is gonna have a very different answer than me. But when I was a brand new DM, something that I implemented was what I called the B team, or the bench warmers, where if I was nervous about balancing a combat encounter, I would have a few bad guys that I was relatively sure the party could handle. And behind my DM screen, I would have, like, let's say that it was bandits and a bandit captain, and I had 3 bandits and a bandit captain. I would have 5 more bandits behind my DM screen. And if one round in, they've already killed the 3 bandits, and I'm like, oh, I miscalculated this, then I introduce 5 more bandits. And also keep in mind that a lot of creatures won't fight to the death. So the other rule that I would like to pull is, if the player characters, even if the bandits are winning, let's say I throw the 5 more in and they kill 3 of them, but now 1 of them is down, but they kill 1 more on the next turn. The rest of the bandits might be like 2 of the bandits might be like, I don't know about this. My buddies are like, most of my buddies are dead. Yes, we got 1 of them, but this isn't going exactly the way we planned. They might flee if you are finding that, like, you want to pull punches. And rather than pulling punches, some of the bandits might be like, screw this, I'm out of here. And the bandit captain's like, what are you doing? We have the upper hand. And they're like, my life's not worth this. So you can play with those elements to really kind of ebb and flow a combat encounter to match what's happening at the table.
Morale is the ultimate fudge, right? Like, you can very easily justify a group of enemies either surrendering or running away if over half of them have been killed. Like, as soon as the players have killed or downed half of their enemies, you can call it a one battle. But you can also say that if the players have injured them all, right, below half, they might all be reconsidering it. I would also say that if you're a new dungeon master, here's a rough rule of thumb. If you're using 1 monster with a challenge rating equal to your party of 4 characters, or maybe party level +1, it's probably never going to be bad.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are using monsters that have a challenge rate, and you can very safely use monsters that have a challenge rating of equal to half of the player's level on a 1-to-1 basis, starting at about 5th level. So once your players are level 5, divide their level by 2 and round down, and you can match the player characters up against monsters of that challenge rating on a 1-to-1 basis. So as an example, if you have 4 player characters that are level 5, a fight against 4 ogres is definitely a fair fight. And I found that this rule of thumb scales pretty well for yielding a pretty safe encounter.
Hopefully that helped out. I saw somebody say it works really well for animals as well. And yeah, if you like have a pack of wolves, sometimes if 1 wolf and a pack of wolves go down, the rest of the wolves are like, that sucked, I'm out of here. So there's a lot to play around with. Just don't think that every battle has to go to the last drop, and also keep some sidelines. There's bandits nearby. They're in another room, whatever. There's a lot to play with there. Cyberface asks, what do you do when the main bad guy of the fight is lasting annoyingly long, even though all the minions are dead and everything is bogging down the fight?
Run away.
Run away.
run away. If the bad guy's minions are dead, that's the time that the bad guy runs.
I have an interesting answer here, and maybe Monty is not going to be a fan of this. I don't know, but something that I have done in the past is if they're down to the final main boss monster and the fight is going on a little too long, if the players are having fun and it's going on long, then the battle continues. But the moment that the energy seems to be draining from the table, if my main bad guy, let's say that it has 100 hit points left, and it gets to the barbarian's turn and he crits. Critting is a big one, but let's say that he does like 30 damage or something.
Yeah.
I might be like, okay, what happens? And just noticing the mood around the table, it's like this battle needs a climactic end. What happens? And I just cut out those final hit points.
Yeah, you just wait for the most exciting move that the players throw out and let that be the finisher, because the conclusion is foregone at that point. So end it on a high note.
Yeah. Especially if there's like an epic move. If like somebody does something cool, like I think I had a player once, I think a warlock at our table used their coolest spell against a big boss who on my page still had 100 hit points, but everybody was like, really, it's not, like, I even heard somebody at the table said, really, it's not dead yet, and other people are like, yeah, I thought it would be dead by now. And then like the warlock used their biggest spell, and I was like, cool, what happens? How do you destroy this thing with this spell? And everybody like high-fived and cheered, and I knew that I had made the right choice.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Animal Nerd. Hey dudes. Hello. How would you go about requesting that your players give you genuine feedback and constructive criticism in regards to your DMing? Thank you.
They might not be able to.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
Sometimes your friends and loved ones are kind of incapable of telling you what sucked because they want to be encouraging.
Yeah.
I try to prod them. Like if you do have people who know how to give feedback, this is the other important thing, is sometimes feedback can be really crappy when a person doesn't know how to give feedback. If you're like, what didn't you like about the campaign? And they're like, well, you're kind of a bad DM and your combat sucks. Then like, no, that's not the right way to give feedback. And you're just being an asshole. If you have friends who know how to give feedback, and I know a few people who are good at giving feedback, and I say, hey, what did you like? And what do you think could have been improved about the combat encounter I ran today? And if they're like, well, you know, it did drag on a little bit long, but you did have an exciting conclusion, but I think the middle could have used maybe something added in. That's cool feedback. Now I'm like, okay, maybe next time I'll add an explosion halfway through the combat encounter.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think the other thing is, don't just ask. If you're not sure, this is the death question to ask. Hey, everybody, what did you think of the last game session? You will never get valuable feedback from that. You will almost always get, oh, it was really good. I had fun. And you'll be like, okay, that was feedback. That was not feedback. You did not ask for feedback. That's not how you ask for feedback. If you want to ask for feedback, you should make a list of the things that you want feedback on and ask specifically about that in an open-ended way. So here's an example. You can say, hey, everybody, I'm a little worried that the campaign might be too easy. What do you think? Is it too easy? Could I make it a little bit harder? Then you've actually given them something to chew on and to give you an opinion about, right? Or you can say, hey, everybody, are you, what did you think of this last mystery? Did you think it was, and say, like, did you find it too easy or too difficult to figure out, or was it just the right mix? And then they can actually give you pointed feedback about that. So if you want feedback about specific things, you have to ask specifically about those things and word the question in a way that is going to give you actionable feedback, right? Like try to imagine getting feedback from other people is kind of like playing Jeopardy. You have to imagine the types of answers you might find useful and ask the question that prompts that kind of answer, and be willing to accept that maybe your players might not be able to give you good feedback. For example, your players probably can't give you good feedback on your homebrew. Yeah. Your players are not play testers, and your campaign is not a good place to play test things. So don't expect your players to be able to give you any sort of meaningful feedback about your homebrew unless you are play testing specifically. And then beyond that, I think if you have other people in your group who are dungeon masters, you're probably going to get better feedback from them. Or people who play D&D a long time, you might get better feedback from them. But always be careful with that stuff, because people who are experienced have opinions.
Yeah. Next question. Denzild K? We'll go with that. How do you combat player ignorance or stupidity? I have players who don't get any of my clues, foreshadowing, hints, etc. I really try to make stuff obvious. I include things from their backstory, etc. But they just don't catch on. First and foremost, there is a chance, and I'm not calling you out on this because this is just something that I've seen happen even with myself, even with Monty. Sometimes, even when you think you're being obvious, all players have a hard time grasping things that you might think are obvious. Mm-hmm. So we've talked actually a lot. One of the great videos that you should watch for how to do this is actually how to run mysteries and how to run mysteries, because we talk about the rule of 3. The first clue, your players are probably going to miss. The second clue, they're probably going to be like, was that a clue? I think I saw something similar before. Could this be it? And the third clue, they might be like, oh, that is a clue. Okay, cool. Now, maybe you need 4 or 5 of these. Now, let's say you're already doing this, because that is possible. Maybe it's possible that, yes, your players are still not getting it and you're doing this. Something that I find really, really helpful, this is something from both movie writing, but it also works in D&D a lot, is to have an NPC, another character, not one that you're running as like a character who is adventuring with a party. Don't do that. But an NPC that is a prominent person in the campaign setting that asks pointed questions. Maybe the players are like, don't know that they're supposed to go to the mountain, and you've laid out 1,000 clues that they're supposed to go to the mountain. And now they're in the room talking to this NPC, and the NPC says, well, what about the mountain? Has anybody thought to look there? And yeah, you're being kind of obvious.
But players will even dismiss that.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that this is the curse of being the dungeon master. As a dungeon master, the things that you think are obvious are probably pretty subtle. And the things that you think are secret and hidden are utterly never going to get. The players are never, like, one set of blue moon, they'll figure it out. And the things that you think are super like barn painted red, you can't miss it by a barn door, the players will walk by a red barn painted red.
I walk by barns all the time and don't acknowledge them.
Yeah, they will. And I would say that the part of it is having players who are genre aware. Your players might not realize, oh, we're playing a campaign that's about mysteries. So like maybe some diagnosis with a session 0 or a mid-campaign like re-session 0 would be necessary to figure out, like, do your players need more obvious quests, right? Do they need more obvious hooks? And as far as I'm concerned, you can't be too obvious with an adventure hook. Like, if you want your players to do something, if you want them to bite the bait, you got to make it juicy, you got to make it shiny, you got to be throwing up the fireworks. Like, you know, like why do all the evil villain layers in video games have skulls all over them? Because that's how you know where the villain is.
Yeah.
Right? Like
again, going back to the example, just I don't know, it's like, where do we go? Where's the evil layer? And then all of a sudden, like, a green light shoots out of the mountaintop, and you're like,
yeah. So don't be afraid of being too obvious.
Yeah.
Right?
If you are getting to the point where you're frustrated that your players haven't grasped it yet, throw it in their face. Just toss a big poster up. Like, the green light shoots out of the mountaintop and the NPC goes, well, have we checked that mountaintop? That looks like a key location for an enemy lair. I wonder if he's hiding out there. And then another NPC goes, actually, I was up in that mountaintop the other day with a patrol and we all died except me, from zombies. Probably something going on there. And now your players are like, do you guys think we should check the mountaintop? And two of the players will be like, I don't know. It doesn't seem good enough. But by this point, they should probably figure it out.
This relates actually really well to our next question from Belantron, which is, what techniques or advice do you have for the opposite scenario, when the players have to get over "this is a trap" fear? That is, when every door or hallway is perceived to be a trap, every NPC is perceived to be lying. How do you keep the game moving but also create surprises? Yeah, this can be a player personality problem. Sometimes you might have players that are just so risk averse that they will never do anything that they don't like surprises and they don't like being surprised. And in those cases, there's not a lot you can do aside from making it like sometimes this is one of those things where you just have to say, you know what? I can make a pretty cool scenario where everything is obvious and it's, what are you going to do about it? Right. Yeah. And don't make it about the surprises anymore. Make it about it all. Like you can say, yeah, hey guys, here's a castle. There are 2,000 ogres in this castle led by a storm giant, and they have a sphere of annihilation, and there's a blue dragon helping them. But if you don't get there in 3 days, the world's going to end. Yeah, and they know you're coming. So deal with it. Right? Like this is one of those things where don't worry about surprising them. Like, make it stupidly obvious and just say, well, yeah, it's dangerous. What are you going to do?
I also, another little tip that I use is, I summarize. If player characters go into a room and they're like, is that a trap? Is that a trap? Are there multiple traps in this room? And I'll say, like, give me an investigation check or a perception check. And if they've been doing this a lot, obviously, if this is the first room that they've done this in, then I let it play out. I get them to check things. But if it becomes a habit, then I'm just like, give me a perception or investigation check. And almost conclusively, if they roll like higher than a 5, then I'm like, you conclusively can tell that this room has nothing dangerous in it.
Yeah.
And then we move on. So I summarize the entire room. They don't have to check every door now. I'm like, you checked all of it. There's no traps in this room, on any of the doors, on any of the tiles. You're good. That's only if they're making a habit of it, though. But summarize. Let them still, if they are still really pushing, then you just start summarizing. And then when they least expect it, then you drop the trap on them once they've given up. Once they're like, okay, no traps ever, and then you spring the trap.
And this is also a reason why, if your players are in a dungeon or in a hostile environment, make trouble come to them. So while they're pondering, is there a door on that trap? Guess what? The door opens and the monster on the other side comes through. Sometimes the best thing you can do when your players are being indecisive is shake up the situation and let them know that, hey, there's a world out here. And if you think that these people are going to act and respond, and they are going to do that. Like, you might even have an NPC say, do you think I'm lying to you about this? And the players then have to, now they're confronted with the factor, are they going to lie to the NPC that they think the NPC is lying, or are they going to tell the truth? And then the NPC might say, well, what could I do to prove it to you? And then now it's on the players, right? And you could have the NPC sense that the players are maybe acting in an evasive way and say, hey, you guys are being pretty evasive with me. Do you not trust me? Like, I can prove something to you in some way. So shake the situation up and snap the players out of it. If they're being indecisive, if they're worried about there being a trap around every corner, have a monster show up behind them.
Nathan asks, planning to start a game with folks who have never played before. Do you think I should do a session 0? I'm concerned if they don't have some actual play in the first session, they will feel bored or cheated. I have ran an initial short session that involves a quick role play and a minor combat encounter as part of my session 0. It's almost not entirely part of the campaign. It's almost like, hey, let's talk about creating the characters. Let's talk about expectations. I do think that a session 0 is important, but you can boil a session 0 down pretty well if you want to get into the action about just like set the expectations. Maybe before you've even ran your session 0, you've already discussed with everybody what day of the week you're going to play. When is everybody available? If you've gotten the like time commitment and stuff like that out of the way, that's half of a session 0. And now you're just making sure everybody's characters are good. And then you jump in and you do like a rats in the basement. And now the big campaign is going to start after that, or the Goblin Cave or whatever.
I think that this is what you should do. If you have a group of players that are brand new to Dungeons and Dragons, as in they have never played D&D before, they've never played a role-playing game before, I agree with you that they should experience what gameplay feels like. So this is what you do. You skip character creation entirely and come to game night with a good selection of well-made level 1 pre-gens and a really simple 5-room dungeon that is goblins, a pit trap, and a riddle. Like something like that, right? Something really basic to give them a taste of like a combat encounter, a social encounter, a skill challenge, an exploration encounter, so they can just experience how it works. Play D&D with them and use that as an opportunity to introduce them to the rules through experience. So say, hey guys, this is what it means to roll for initiative. This is what it means to do this. And don't worry about telling them how all the stats on their character sheet work yet. Don't worry about that. Just play once with them. Then at the end of the night, ask them if they enjoyed it. Ask them what confused them. Ask them, okay, great. And then say, so now that you've tried D&D out, do you think you might be interested in playing a long campaign? And then you explain to them what it means to play a long D&D campaign. And I would say to them, well, since you're new to D&D, we might just try a short campaign to start. Maybe we'll play 4 to 8 more times. I've got a great adventure that I can run for you. It's called The Lost Mine of Phandelver. And if you want to, you can keep using this pre-generated character. But if you really want to make your own character, you and I can meet on Zoom sometime and I'll show you how to do it. And you and I will walk through together how to make a character. And then have that one-on-one time and then do a session 0, then run Lost Mine of Phandelver. And then at the end of Lost Mines of Phandelver, if everyone's still on board with it, you can then decide to continue with those characters to the campaign that you really wanted to play, or you can decide to start over again and do a proper session 0 or something like that. But having a brand new player come in and be like, you are going to have a session 0 now for the character that you are going to play from level 1 to 20 in my epic campaign that I have been waiting on with my heart to run forever. It's a little bit much to ask for a new player, especially if you've never played with them before. So I would take it in phases.
Good answer. Moving on to a question from Gregory. With Tasha's rules for changing racial stat attributes, is it worth it to design races for homebrew settings, or is it just better to reskin an existing race? My answer for this is pretty straightforward. If you want to make new races for D&D, then by all means don't hold yourself back on that if that is something that sounds exciting and fun for you. If your players came to you and said, I would like to play something that they've made up, I would just steer them towards the custom lineage from Tasha's. I think the custom lineage is a great tool to use when your players like, I don't like any of these races, but I want to play this, but maybe they're brand new to D&D and it's not about the attributes or the abilities. It's like, I would like to play a half ogre or something. And you're like, okay, we're going to do, or I mean, again, reskinning also works. If somebody was like, can I play a half ogre? I'd be like, yeah, you're going to use the Goliath option or something.
Yeah, I think that probably, like, you know, do what you want to do for your world building. Like, don't worry about that. Obviously, if you have a very specific idea in mind for your world, that's fine. We probably don't need a new kind of elf. We probably don't need a new kind of dwarf. We probably don't need a new take on something that already exists. But it's fine if you want to do that for your own game. That's totally legitimate. I would say that I think that if you want to explore new options in this regard, I think that it has to be something really out there to really be worth building something. Like, if you're just making a new lineage that is just a different ability score combo, probably not really. Like, if it does just boil down to it's an ability score combo plus a skill proficiency plus something that's kind of close to a feat, probably, you know, just use the custom lineage. But if you and if you want to have anything that flies, you can just it's really easy to reskin an Aarakocra. Like, so a lot of the archetypes have been covered already, but there's still more room for creativity. Maybe you got something really out there. So if you got an idea that's really out there that you don't think can be justified with what already exists in the game, then make it. Like, go for it.
Yeah. Mystic Melvian asks, could I take your faction intrigue ideas, blow them up to a bigger scale, and have kingdom intrigue? If I could, is kingdom intrigue the right word? For me, I use faction intrigue on small scale or grand scale. The answer is yes, you can do this. I would still call it a faction intrigue, but if I wanted to go very standard Dungeons and Dragons lore here, you could do a faction intrigue where you have a civilization of elves, dwarves, humans, and what am I missing? Elves, dwarves, humans.
Halflings, gnomes, dragonborn, tieflings, anything.
But yeah, you have those as like their own kingdoms, and they each represent a faction. And you would still use the faction rules that Monty and I laid out, and you could do that. As a matter of fact, I have a half-baked homebrew world, which I I kind of ripped it apart when I was working on the Drakenheim book and filled in some of the Drakenheim stuff with it. But originally the campaign world I was building worked on the same model that we used in the Drakenheim book, but it was a world-spanning campaign. And you had these multiple factions that were groups of people who were building civilizations in a ruined world. And but it was the same dynamic, just spread out on a larger scale.
I would probably call it political intrigue, because then you could have the opportunity for non-state actors, like a really influential mercenary company or a mage guild or something like that can operate on a sort of nation state level. And probably you got war as a major factor there as well. So yes, I think it definitely scales up. I think that's a good point to jump on to our Drakenheim questions, don't you?
Yeah, sure. So let's jump into some Drakenheim specific questions for those of you hanging out here. If you are not into the Drakenheim world, these are going to be very Drakenheim-y questions.
Yeah.
But you should be, because you should hop on our Kickstarter if you haven't already. Yeah. So let's jump on the first question here from Rob. How would you deal with multiple characters wanting backstories with similar campaign-altering reveals implications? Example, what if two of my players want to be Drakenheim royalty in an upcoming campaign?
I think that's awesome, and it's a great way to potentially seed inter-party conflict, and that's where you want to... With Drakenheim in particular, if you have two players in your party that both want to be heirs to the throne, you can do some cool things with that. That's where the first question that you want to know, that's where what I would very carefully do is I would go to each player individually and say, hey, another player in the party is proposing something that is a little bit similar to what you're interested in. Would you like to change your concept, or would you like to conspire with this other player together? Don't tell them who the other player is. Or would you just like to continue with your idea? And then your players are going to give you some answers, and you're going to be able to take it from there. Because I could see going a couple different ways with this. The first thing is that the player says, no, I want to keep my concept, and no, I don't want to conspire with the other player. In which case you build a backstory where you build a story where there's two characters who are both heirs to the throne, but don't know that each other are heirs to the throne.
I think,
right?
I do think another thing just to be careful of. So in the Drakenheim campaign, there is room for player-on-player conflict. But I do think it's important that in the session 0, you discuss with your group whether or not they are interested in inter-player character conflict.
Yeah.
If they're not, then you should ask everybody to choose a differing personal quest. If they are, find out to what extent, because there's also different extents. You'll actually see in our live stream, Joe, Jill, and myself are open to inter-player conflict, but we all have the mindset that we will resolve it together and end up on the same side in the end. It becomes a question of who's going to back down from their goal, not a question of, will I kill my fellow player characters? Joe, Jill, and I are not interested in our player characters killing each other. If you have a table that is, you need to make sure that everybody is. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. But if you ask the players, are you interested in inter-character conflict that you will have to work to resolve as a team? And they say, yeah, that sounds cool. Then, yeah, have two heirs, and they're going to have to decide what to do. Yeah. But if everybody at the table says, I want no inter-character conflict, then you're going to have to say, well, one of you two needs to change your idea here.
Yeah, it can be a back and forth, and maybe sometimes you do have to say with certain concepts and ideas, actually, there's too much conflict and overlap here, and if people aren't on board for that, then that's not what's going to happen, right? It's okay to ask a player to revise their character concept. It is fine, and maybe it comes down to a coin toss over who has to do it. So this is part of the reason why I always encourage players, when you come into a new campaign, come in with at least two ideas that you're equally excited about. Yeah. Because it might turn out that one of your ideas doesn't gel well with the rest of the party.
Knight's Angel.
Yeah, moving on.
Knight's Angel asks, what are the Edicts of Lumen? To detail, how many edicts are there, and what do they entail?
Sure. So for those who don't know, in the world of Drakenheim, the Edicts of Lumen are the equivalent of the Magna Carta of the setting. It is a treaty that was signed by the mages of the Amethyst Academy, the highest flame keepers of the faith of the Sacred Flame, and the royalty of the continent. And essentially, it is a shared legal document that outlines basically a constitution of how all the nations of the continent will treat arcane magic. And the Edicts of Lumen essentially bestow protection. The Edicts of Lumen happened because there was a history of persecution and war between between the church and the academy, between arcane magic and divine magic, essentially. And the nobility was split between those sides. And so this treaty established the balance of power by basically saying that if you have magic spellcasting ability, you cannot be a royal heir, and that there are certain provisions that will be granted to magic users and the Amethyst Academy, certain protections that they'll be given, but also certain legal restrictions. So it is a treaty in the respect that it only holds itself together because everybody still agrees to it. And it is enforced by the idea that if someone were to violate it, that would be tantamount to an act of war, at least at the ultimate level. But there are other ways of talking about how to resolve infractions within it. So the Coles Notes version is, and this will be in the book, is that there's kind of a brief summary of how the edicts work, but basically the Articles of Inheritance say if you are a sorcerer, warlock, or wizard, or have arcane spellcasting ability, you cannot have noble title and you can't own land. The Articles of Neutrality basically say that if you are that the Academy controls the sale of magical goods and services across the continent, but they have to, like, just in the same way that there's net neutrality, they can't charge Kingdom A 2,000 gold for a magic sword and then charge Kingdom B 3,000 gold for the same type of magic sword. They have to offer the same prices to everybody, and they can't discriminate between customers. So that they have to offer their services to everybody. The Articles of Guardianship give the Amethyst Academy the legal authority to take children who manifest magical powers into their custody at the age of 6. As early as the age of 6, until those children come of age and master their abilities. The Articles of Enterprise kind of give the rules on what the Amethyst Academy can do about their magical services, and also that they have to be politically neutral. The Articles of Malediction ban some kinds of spellcasting from being taught. Key emphasis on the word being taught. And the Articles of Umbrage basically outline a very Byzantine way of doing it. Now, the Edicts of Lumen have been intentionally kept brief because the idea is that this is a Byzantine document of contradictory and sometimes contradictory rules. So it gives a framework for the setting to have an interesting kind of political treaty. In many ways, the Edicts of Lumen are no more powerful than the Treaty of Versailles, right? It's a piece of paper. But treaties mean things, and they often, when treaties are broken, that's often when the battle lines are drawn. So it's something that everybody's worried about it, but there was a very early draft of the Edicts of Lumen where I was like, the Edicts of Lumen were written on one of the inevitables, and if anyone violates them, the inevitables will be unleashed upon the world. And I was like, you know what? It's kind of more interesting if it's just a mortal thing. It's just a piece of paper. Make of that what you will.
Awesome. I want to try to get some questions from chat in here. So we do have a few more. Do you want to go through a few more of these before we do? Do you want to try to motor through a couple, or? Yeah,
let's do one more Drakenheim question.
Which one is your favorite, Monty, out of these?
Ooh, I think, did running Untold Tales of Drakenheim add or change any content for the book? If so, how so?
I'm going to answer this question by also combining it with the question, what was the most difficult portion of the book for you to write or flesh out? What Untold Tales of Drakenheim allowed us to do was, first of all, playtest our contamination system. And second of all, playtest new locations that were never seen in the
Yeah.
original campaign. One of the benefits of having ran a live stream campaign is that almost all the locations in the book have received playtesting. Untold Tales of Drakenheim meant that we got to run several new locations in both the original run of Untold Tales and the newer run of Untold Tales. Not all of them made it in the book. And the reason why is we got to see which ones felt like they gelled really, really well and which ones didn't. And that was actually probably the biggest challenge of writing the book as well, was making sure that the new locations felt as rooted into the world and the lore as the other locations that we had already ran. So Untold Tales really allowed us to explore that, and we also got to revamp some of the locations. One of my favorites, and I'm not going to give spoilers for what's in the book, but in the Untold Tales First Light, we explored the Black Ivory Inn. When we got into writing the Black Ivory Inn, we decided that it should be way cooler and way bigger of a location and a much more interesting location. And we got to expand on it in really meaningful ways. So that was really exciting. And so you're going to see kind of revamped and remastered versions of a lot of the Untold Tales locations. The Pale Man is another one that got a complete reworking when it went into the book.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. I just saw a bunch of questions flood in. I wasn't able to grab those.
Yeah,
I have two on our page from earlier. But yeah, let's...
Cool. Let's grab some of those early ones that you grabbed.
So I grabbed one question. What would you rate the horror level in the book? Our show is PG-13. Shadows has been much gnarlier. My son loves dungeons, but Shadows was too much. I hope the book will be okay for him.
If you are running the game, you'll be able to adjust the levers on that. I would say some of the artwork has come back pretty creepy, right? But like, if you've seen the front cover of the book, that's about as graphic as it gets. Like, you know, that front image on our, I remember that the image of the delirium drags that's on the top of the Kickstarter page. We were like, is this too much? And we're like, ooh. So, but you know, there's some pretty graphic descriptions, but I think that you as a parent, you know, you just read it. And if you think that it's too much for your children, because you're running the game, you have my 100% permission to censor my work.
Yeah, we try to keep everything at a PG-13. Even Shadows is meant to be at a PG-13, although I will admit that Monty and I are really diving into our love of Lovecraftian and cosmic horror a little bit heavier in season 2. The book, we wrote some great descriptions. Like, for me, the description of the cathedral is pretty haunting. The description of the throne room is pretty intense, but none of them are like bloodbath gore, and there's no bad language, there's no sexuality in this book. And again, dungeon masters have the ability to change it. Like, if I read something in a book that I don't want to include, I just paraphrase or change it and I put it through the filters for my table. So that's kind of what I do with that.
Yeah. I'll grab another one here. Cameron asks, my friends and I have been are playing D&D online. Will the book have anything to help online DMs? For example, battle maps, online artwork of the important NPCs. So right now, so a few interesting details on this. People asked us about VTT stuff, and we actually found out partway through the campaign that if you're a first-time publisher, which we are considered because we're the Dungeon Dudes, Roll20 actually doesn't let you, won't let you put them in your crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah.
And all the virtual tabletops actually have a policy that VTT integration is not allowed to be offered as a stretch goal. It must be a core offering of the product. And that, combined with the fact that many VTTs also want you to have a published work under your belt before they let you publish on their platform, essentially means that we basically have to finish the book before the VTTs will let us do full VTT integration. That was an interesting thing to find out. What we are doing, though, is there will be image files for the maps that you can load. So you'll be able to do a DIY sort of thing for your VTTs. And hopefully in the coming months, we can explore more options for expanding that and maybe doing more things to make it easier to run. It was one of those things where, partnering with the big VTTs does require some work on the business side as well, especially with integration into their marketplaces and things like their marketplace fees and all these sorts of things. And so with all that kind of combined, we haven't gone full in the deep end yet. So stay tuned. Hopefully by the time we release the book and are printing the book, we'll have more information about VTT stuff.
Gav asks, any tips on interesting ways to get more money and cool stuff into the hands of a party of players that habitually just don't loot enemies after combat or search for it, etc.?
Have their coin purses spill out across the floor as they die.
Yeah, so if you've watched our show, and I've taken this on as a DM as well, and this is apparently, according to the internet, this is blasphemous, and I see so many people comment on our live stream being like, why don't they ever loot corpses? I think looting corpses is stupid. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't like that in my game. I don't expect anybody to do it. I find that like spending 10 to 15 minutes of like, what do I find in this person's pockets? What do I find in this person's pockets? It takes me out of the narrative. It takes me out of the world. And I just picture it's like, we stopped this goblin in the middle of town and now everybody's watching while I like hang it upside down and shuffle it out for what its belongings are. I immediately grant the players what they find. They finish the combat and I say, amongst the loot, you find 20 gold and a scroll. And I just give it to them. I don't even ask them. They don't ask to loot the corpses, and I don't ask them if they want to loot the corpses. They succeed at the the combat encounter. I just tell them what they get. The funny thing is, every time I've had a player say, "Okay, I loot the corpse. What's in there?" I don't have. Usually, if they ask, I have nothing written down for that corpse. So I say, "You find, I don't know, a half-eaten sandwich," and they go, "That's it." And I'm like, "Yeah, you just went into this guy's home and stabbed him. He's not carrying 100 gold with him. Maybe there's a treasure chest in the next room that I do have written down. But if you're wondering what he's carrying, it's a sandwich and like a pen."
Mm-hmm. Okay. When in doubt, pick up some dice and roll them, and that's how many gold pieces they had in their pockets. Yeah. Right. That's kind of the way I would look at it. Here is a cool one here. Sorry, I just missed it. So actually just a cool kind of logistical question. 2 questions from chat. Ipa asked, I have a personal question. I really want to get your magnificent book, but I am from Russia. Will there be any translated books? Maybe in the future. Translations sound like an awesome idea, but from what I understand, localization is pretty expensive. And we would need to bring some specialists in that are fluent in English and Russian and various languages. I think that's going to be, I can't promise that. That sounds like a really cool thing. I know at least here in Canada, we have lots of folks that are very fluent in French. And I know some folks that are very fluent in German and other languages, but we would have to see about that down the line. I can't promise that, but that is a very cool suggestion. I think we'll think about it. And Jason also wants to know, is the release date solid as of now, and will backers get the book before the general population? Backers will almost certainly get their shipments sent out to them first, and the postal service willing, get them in their hands before people can. It might be likely that all backers also get the PDF a little bit, like when the books go to print, you might also be able to get the PDF for download. So April is our goal. Again, I want to say the release date is solid, but anything can happen. We live in crazy times. So, and global shipping is a mess right now. So, we have all of our ducks in a row to make sure that this thing gets put out and get together, and you know, hopefully it stays steady. Things can happen that are beyond our control, but we have taken all the steps necessary on our end to hit that April delivery date.
Jacob asks why. Answer: why not? There, that was easy. The Mr. I'm going to butcher this. Mr. Fogal asks, how are you guys enjoying VTT? I'm going to say there's been pros and cons. The pros being when we are playing with guests from other locations in the world, VTT has been astronomically helpful. We've been able to play with some people that we would have never had the chance to play with in person. Also, the maps are really handy, easy to see, and easy to manage. I
also love tracking hit points in VTTs. It's so easy to track damage.
Yeah. I will say, though, at the end of the day, the camaraderie and energy and maps and minis, like the actual Dwarven Forge sets and minis, there's something tactile and there's something beautiful about it that I just miss. My energy levels can never be as good as when I'm in person with the gang.
Yeah.
No matter what. And so for all of the great things that VTT has offered, I am excited to get back to in-person gaming. And actually for my home game, I didn't run through VTT. I actually just called my game off until I think next week we're going to start back in person. And that's just because as a DM, I just much prefer the energy level of in-person.
Yeah, me too. I've enjoyed virtual tabletops. I'm glad I got the experience using them, but I'm looking forward to playing in person again.
And I do say that now that it's under our belt, Monty and I can do a lot with VTTs now that we can jump into that setting. So having both options is key. Both have extreme value.
Yeah, I really look forward to coming back in person.
I really like, here's another great question from Amon Kalmurray. Hey guys, big fan of the channel. Thank you. How do you guys suggest keeping a session moving quickly? My games often end up going much slower than expected.
First question, how many players are you playing with?
That was my first question. Yeah. Second question, if you're the DM, I want you to remember, it's not all up to you. It's not all up to you on the pacing of the game. Unfortunately, your players are responsible for a part of that. I've played at a table where I've had players who take a really long time to figure out what they're going to do on their turn, and it can slow things down to a halt and really remove people from the game. Unfortunately, that is a symptom of a player who might need some help. Some of the things that you might want to do, I've learned that I prefer 3 to 4 players. I don't like a really slow game, and I have played for upwards of 7 or 8 players, and I just don't enjoy it as much, and it just slows down the whole game. Some people are great at it. For tips, if you are playing with more players and your players are kind of slow, I use static damage. Not everybody's a fan of this, but reducing the amount of dice that I have to roll as a DM reduces the amount of time that I take and puts the time back in the hands of the players. Really, I'm here for the players. As a dungeon master, I'm here for them to be entertained and have fun. I actually learned very recently from our friends over at
But you gotta have fun too.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm there having fun making scenes, but rolling dice, I roll the D20 to see if I hit or miss. But when it comes to static damage, the folks over at Crit Academy had some great advice. They said instead of just using the static damage, write down also the lowest damage that they could do and the highest damage they could do. And you as a DM, depending on the flow of combat, just picks like if the party's doing really well, maybe you hit them with max damage to like strike some fear in their hearts. Or if you need to do a bit of lower damage for a turn, you do the lowest amount of damage, but you average out around the middle. It's a great tool for just quickening up combat.
I have 2 other tips, and these are things that I learned from live streaming. First of all, so carve out the first half an hour to 45 minutes of your game night just for everybody to get together and catch up as friends. Accept the fact that it is probably going to take you anywhere from half an hour to an hour to get the game started, and just say, you know what, everybody, game night starts at 5 o'clock, but dice come down at 6. And so if you guys are going to eat a meal together, if you're going to order pizza, eat food first, then start playing. If you and have that social time to catch up with each other on the week, then take a designated 20-minute break. Because what happens in a lot of D&D games is that people get up to go to the bathroom, people get up to get another snack or another drink, people start having table talk. But if you have a designated break where everyone can just unwind, get another slice of pizza, go to the washroom, do what they need to do, you will find that the game time becomes more focused as well. That's at least, it does help. Like having a clear separation of game time and social time is a useful way of making both of those things mean more and keeping the pace happening in the game time.
Yeah. I also, something that I do when I'm getting ready for my game that I learned early on to save time, I pre-roll initiative for all the monsters. That's another one.
Yep. It's a good way to do it. Cammy McPherson asks, thoughts on evil PCs in Drakenheim? Don't use alignment in Drakenheim. Just don't use alignment in Drakenheim. Doesn't matter. Your character's alignment shouldn't even be a thing that is discussed. It's your character's motivation is more important than their alignment. Your character and part of what Drakenheim is about asking some hard questions. And even the original player characters in the first season of the campaign, they asked, "Are we the baddies?" many times.
I still stand by that we were the heroes.
For me, I often draw inspiration from music. Remember Borderlands? Did you ever play Borderlands, Kelly?
Oh yeah, I love Borderlands.
Do you know the opening song from Borderlands? Is it by Cage the Elephant? Or is it by Cage the Elephant might be a different one. It's the one that the chorus is "This ain't no place for no heroes."
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's Cage the Elephant or someone else. But for me, that refrain, that is a very Drakenheim feeling. It's like, this is not a place where heroes don't come here.
Yeah, and I think the characters getting to discover where they fall throughout the campaign is important. We just usually toss alignment out the window for most of our campaigns.
Yeah. But if you have players that are going to act like murder hobos, they're going to get trounced by the factions real quick.
Yep. This ain't no place for murder hobos. Unless they join the Queen of Thieves. Then the Queen of Thieves is kind of...
But even then, it's bad for business, right?
Yeah. But the Queen of Thieves has the most let's wreck stuff.
Yeah. It's the heavy. It's the heavy that does... No Place for No Heroes, and Cage the Elephant is Ain't No Rest for the Wicked, which is from Borderlands 1.
I don't know if we want to answer this question, but I might give an elusive answer. 40 Auras asks, after Shadows, will we start another new adventure in Drakenheim, or will we revisit the characters from the first season? My answer is we are planning a third season, and what happens in that third season is up to what happens
in the second season
2.
Yeah.
Just like the events of season 1 dictated season 2. And the last thing I'll leave you with on that is, have we seen the last of Drakenforce? Probably
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No. Drakenforce still has some stories to tell. The characters, the Dusk Wardens, have some stories to tell, and how those stories interact and what's going to happen in season 3 is yet to be determined. So stay tuned.
Yep.
Let's see. Any other good questions?
Austin H asks, what advice do you have on making fair encounters with the Paladin aura? My players are near invincible within it, but are super vulnerable outside of it. With aura of protection, so my first question is, did you roll for ability scores? And does your Paladin have like ability scores that are off the chain? Because, youch. The aura of protection really can make a party feel like they are invincible, but it is only a 10-foot radius. I think that the thing with it is that make sure that you use diversity in the spells that target different ability scores in your villain spell selection. If you really want to get mean, use things like the shove to push people out of the aura. And an incapacitated paladin doesn't have an aura, so there's that too. Yeah, I would say, that's part of the strength of playing a paladin. It does suck that it feels like your party is like invulnerable to spells, but you don't want to make that ability inconsequential. I actually feel that I think it's kind of cool that your party feels vulnerable outside it and invincible within it. And I would actually lean into that more. Yeah. As a way of challenging them.
One thing you always want to be careful of, and a lot of people have called us out in the videos because I think they missed where we were going with some of our answers. But one thing is we advertise a lot how to counter your players in certain situations. But I think the flip side of that is you want your players to feel powerful and you want their abilities to be useful. If you have a character who has a really cool ability, you should know how to counter it, but you don't want to implement that counter every single time. You want them to feel like their ability is useful, and then every once in a while throw a wrench in the gear that makes them go, oh no, and then they have to work around it. But for the most part, let your paladin's aura be cool, because they played a paladin and they want that aura and they want that ability to feel special. But yeah, there's always options.
I'm going to interrupt you, Kelly, because guess what YouTube channel just hit 300,000 subscribers?
Oh, man. Oh, boy. Oh, there it is. Okay. We're going to spend the last few minutes of this patting ourselves on the back. No, we just hit 300,000 subscribers on YouTube just now. That's crazy. That's crazy. I actually missed it by I missed it by 5. I said I was going to keep my eye on it, and I haven't looked at it since we started streaming. I completely forgot. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all 300,000 humans out there.
My God.
And if you're not human, then, thank you as well. That's a lot of people. I don't know, 300,000 people. Are you sure you're following the right channel?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and welcome to all of our new subscribers. I hope you find a lot of stuff to enjoy.
If any of you new subscribers are in chat today, I would like you to know that thank you. And for all of the old subscribers that are also in chat, I want all of you to know that I love each and every one of you.
It is such a privilege to have such an amazing group of people to like. One of the things that I find so awesome about doing this is just the community of people that have grown up around this channel. Our YouTube comments are a really constructive space. Like, even when people disagree with the things we say in our videos, with good reason, because we're just two idiots, there's always really constructive conversations and so much outpouring of support and interesting tips and tricks. Like, the YouTube comment section has a reputation, and YouTube more broadly, for being a cesspool, but I don't feel that way about our community. I think that we're really good at being respectful to each other. We're really good at working together. We're really good at talking about the hobby that we all love, regardless of where we come from, what we believe, what we do, how what we think. It really is amongst all of our communities. I think that in our Patreon, on our channel, it is a thing that gives me a lot of hope, because we can all come together and enjoy our love of this game, and in a respectful and really generous manner. And that spirit of generosity, whether is something that I am so grateful for in our community.
Just to echo that a little bit, something that I found, especially everybody knows we're coming out of a pretty crappy couple years of global pandemic. One of the things that really hit me is during isolation, I wasn't able to go see friends or family. So where I went for support and community was the internet. And I actually got really disillusioned for a while, because a lot of places that I loved going on the internet to talk about things were very toxic and poisonous. It would be like, I would go on the internet and be like, hey, I really like this video game. And 400 people would be like, you're an idiot for liking that video game. And I'm like, oh, man, I just want to talk with people. But the more that I felt that, the more proud I was of the community that we have built. Because when I say we, I don't just mean Monty, myself, Jill, Joe, Kyle. I mean the community itself, all of you out there. You're all great. And being a part of this community has actually been one of the safest places that I've found on the internet for me to be myself. I'm a big nerd. I really like liking things. And I don't like it when people get really mad at me for liking things. I like a lot of things. And I found that in this community, I'm able to vocalize just my liking of stuff. And people are like, that's cool, man. I'm glad that you like it. And we have constructive conversations, and we explore things together. I love our Discord community. I love the YouTube comments. And there have actually been times where, it's hard to read people through a comment. There have been times where somebody will leave a comment and I read it as if it were a hostile comment. They'll be like, well, why didn't you say this in your video? And I read it like that. I'm like, well, why didn't you say this in your video? And I'll respond and be like, well, what I meant was this. And in my head, I'm like, get off my back. And then they immediately respond and they're like, thank you so much for responding. It's so great to hear from you. I'm such a big fan. And I read that and go, oh, I read this wrong. And they were actually being kind. And now I'm reading it again. And okay. And then I respond, I'm like, yeah, no problem. And it's this really funny vibe that I'm like, I expect people to be mean on the internet, but most of y'all are great. It's been so great.
And I just want to say, like, another comment that we get a lot, and a few in the chat of folks that have said, watching our live streams helped them get through a difficult period in their lives. It gave them comfort at a hard moment. I can remember a few people giving comments where, they had a family member in hospital. They wrote a comment and they unwound from that and escaped from that experience by watching one of our live streams or watching some of our videos, or people who were feeling isolated through all of the situations that we've been in and watched our videos and felt that sense of community. And I just have to say, like, thank you for sharing that with us, because I never would have expected that. I thought, here we are just nerding out, Kelly and I started this whole channel being like, this would be a fun thing for us to do on weekends. We can crack a couple beers and record our nerdy conversations and have fun with it. The fact that we can inspire people with what we've done feels well, I think that I remember thinking that, like, as someone who is as an aspiring artist, I remember thinking, like, the goal of the artist is to inspire others, and that bardic inspiration idea. And I feel like if our work has just helped someone a little bit through a hard day, has inspired a bit of creativity in someone, has gotten someone into this game, and not just one person but several, like, wow, that's so amazing. And I never thought that just being a nerd could have that kind of impact. So thank you. I'm so grateful to have been able to it's a privilege to have been able to be that source of inspiration or comfort, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, you all have really made dreams come true. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do with my film career. I finished film school and was like, I don't know, what do I do? I wanted to be a writer. I was very passionate about exploring characters. I loved writing scripts about like really deep dives into characters. I wanted to be an actor. And I was like, I don't know how to do all of this. I don't know where this brings me. And even when we started this channel, I was like, well, this will be something I do on the side, but it's not going to fulfill those dreams. But now here I am, and you all have given me a platform in which I can live that. I can explore those passions and share them with you. And to hear that I can inspire other people is one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my entire life. I am baffled by that, in a good way. I never expected it. I never dreamed of it. And 300,000 people, that's a lot of people connecting with what we do. And I'm just some guy who really, really likes Dungeons and Dragons a lot. It's like, that's my credentials here. I really like D&D a lot. And so I decided to turn a camera on with one of my best friends and talk about it. And it's been amazing that that's been able to reach so many people, and that so many people care about our opinion on stuff. Because really, we're just two nerds loving the game and trying to explore it as best we can, and hoping to inspire others to explore it and be open with it. Don't limit yourself in D&D. Don't listen to the people who are like, you have to play it this way. The beautiful thing about this game is it can be whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. You can explore stories with your friends. You can go to new worlds, play new characters, and do it the way that you always dreamed of. And that's what's so special about this game. And that's really what our channel is about. It's about showing the world that anybody can have fun playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Now, we've collaborated with a lot of awesome people in putting this together. Beyond just our amazing audience and our amazing community, Jill and Joe and our partners, Kirsten and Shay, the folks at Ghostfire Games, the amazing people who have sponsored the channel and helped us keep the lights on, our patrons. But I also do want to give there's one person in particular who I would like to thank, and that's Kelly McLaughlin, for being a better friend and collaborator that I can ever hope to ask for. I have had some great friendships. I have had some great collaborators, but to be able to have a friend who is such an amazing collaborator is such a rare and amazing thing. People talk about you should never go into business with your friends, and or that you should be careful about mingling business, having a good time and work and stuff like that. And time and time again, Kelly, you've been someone who we can both that I can always count on, to whether it is like when I tell you at the last minute, hey, the video is going to go up in an hour, but we need to fix X, Y, and Z, and you do it and you get it done. Or when when I haven't been feeling filming and it's like, can we just reschedule this? And we've kept on top of our schedule for till now, I don't think we've missed a single week for our regular upload schedule, right? Or where you have to go, or the times when I have messed up the audio recording so much we had to reshoot 2 weeks worth of episodes. And it was definitely my fault when that happened. And you have never, and even in the times when I made mistakes, you have never responded with anger. You have never responded with vitriol. You've always taken things with patience and grace. And you've always remained a friend throughout this entire thing. And we've dealt with some pretty brutal stuff over the history of this channel. So thank you for being an incredible friend and an incredible collaborator in this incredible project.
I'm not crying on a live stream. That's ridiculous. This collaboration has been one of the most important things that I've ever done in my life, and I'm so thankful, Monty, that first of all, for getting me into the game. It grew our friendship, and you introduced me to something that would change my entire life, and you're the other side of this, and I know everybody out there, like, you don't get to see behind the scenes, but like Monty is the encyclopedia. We made the joke a couple weeks ago that Monty's stat is intelligence and mine is charisma. I mess up the rules for D&D all the time. When we're filming, you don't realize how much stuff we cut, where I'm like, and then this ability works like this, and Monty's like, it doesn't work like that, and I'm like, no,
you need to make sure that you say it's a reaction, not a bonus action.
Yeah. So Monty, I just like, thank you for always being on the ball, and thank you for always having my back and never making me feel stupid. It's something that like I get afraid of because I do forget things. I'm a very forgetful person. I'm a very clumsy person, and I'm definitely all charisma, no intelligence. But I
wouldn't go that far.
I will say that like we both bring so much to this project, and like I was thrilled the day that I remember talking to you, because I was worried, and for all of you listening out there, that this is behind the scenes stuff here, but I was worried for a little while that I wasn't pulling my weight in Dungeon Dudes. And I remember going to you and being like, Monty, I'm sorry that you are doing a lot of the businessy stuff because I feel like I'm not pulling my weight there. And you were like, Kelly, I never want to edit a video in my entire life. Please never make me edit a video. You're doing that, and that is more than enough. Please keep being our editor. And I was like, I love editing. So when we collaborate, I've been a writer for years, but the stuff that I write has only gotten better by having you added to it. Your brain, the way that you flow words together, the way that you weave stories and narratives. I thought I was a decent storyteller, but collaborating with you has made me see how much better we both can be. And there have been times working on this book and working on projects with you where I read back what we came up with, and I'm like, neither of us could have actually written that. That's better than both of us. Together, we are better than the sum of our parts. And that's why this has been such a great journey. And I know that you people in chat are listening to Monty and I just like give each other virtual hugs right now, and I hope you're enjoying it. But yeah. Monty, it's been the greatest joy of my life to work on this project with you, and I'm excited for what the future holds, because we're the best of friends, and we're going to keep kicking ass and making the best D&D stuff that we can.
I think that it is such a privilege to have such an amazing friend that elevates the quality of the work that we do together. One of the things that I think that the Chili Peppers in one of their biographies talked about how they're a band that is greater than the sum of their parts, and they have some pretty amazing parts in their band. They have one of the best bass players in ever. But the whole thing works, and we do good work. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished and really proud of what we've achieved. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank again all of you for coming on this journey with us to 300,000 and to the last days of our Kickstarter. The journey has been incredible. Monty and I have done so much together, and we have so much more to do.
Yep.
So before I get more emotional, just one last, we're 8 past the hour. One last big thank you to everybody out there. I do want to, with this, throw it out to Joe, Jill, Kyle, Kirsten, and Shay as being kind of the other major part of this. Monty and I could not have gotten as far as we did without the help of the names that I just listed. Monty and I were the brains that birthed this child project, but it wouldn't have grown without those people that were involved.
No way. Whether it's been the amazing help of Kyle doing edits on our Drakenheim show and running the stream, getting the privilege to play with Jill and Joe, and absolutely, like, Kirsten, you have the patience of a saint. Thank you for putting up with all of this stuff going on in our basement.
I don't think when Shay and I got together and I said, "Hey, do you want to play some D&D? I'm kind of into it," and she was like, "Yeah, sure." I don't think she knew what she was getting into, but she, every time, I'm always nervous. I always have this moment where I'm like, "Shay, can I talk to you about some ideas I have?" And she's never ever said no. She always sits down. She's like, let me, she'll like get herself her wine or her coffee, depending on the time of day. And it's like, "Tell me your story, Kelly. I'm going to sit here and listen." And I will go for an hour pitching ideas to her while she's just like, cool. And then she'll help. She loves coming up with characters. She loves diving into this. She's been so supportive. And like, just to have the support and to have the friends and the people along with us on this journey. It's great. So great.
Yeah. And I mean, Kirsten has just been like, whether it is, I remember when we first started live streaming and she was like, "I thought you guys were only going to do 6 episodes of this live stream thing, but now you keep doing it. What's going on? Am I going to have to like be quiet every night? Am I going to be making tacos for this group every week?" And like, Kirsten, I'm really sorry, but yeah, I'm going to be having my friends over every week. I hope it's going to be okay. So she puts up with a lot with me, and much in the same way, we're very, very fortunate to have some wonderful ladies in our back corners as well.
Yeah. Also, talking about Joe and Jill, we managed to scoop 2 of the greatest D&D players, I think, in the world. So I'm thrilled to be playing with them as well. And they're amazing.
Yep. And Kyle has just been like the ultimate. Kyle has given us so much help on so many things.
Kyle's like the unsung hero of our entire project. Even though a lot of people sing his praises, I love the fact that he's just the thumbs up in the background. But Kyle lifted a lot of pressure off of Monty and I as the company grew. The weight was getting too much, and Kyle just popped in and was like, "I can take a large chunk of this weight off of you guys." And we would have drowned in that weight if it wasn't for him. So thank you, Kyle.
So with all those thank yous out of the way, we could go on forever, but because it has, and I think that it's that whole thing where you just don't get this far without the help of a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
and all of you.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful. I'm proud of what it feels strange to say I'm proud of what I've accomplished, because I am, as proud as I am so grateful to have been surrounded by so many people that helped me accomplish that.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for getting us to 300,000 subscribers. It's a big deal for us.
Yep. And all of you that have backed our Kickstarter, supported us on Patreon, thank you. We will be back again this Friday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. 6 p.m. Eastern to 8 p.m. Eastern with Jill and Joe to close out the Dungeons of Drakenheim Kickstarter. So head on over to drakenheim.com if you haven't checked that out already, or visit us at patreon.com/dungeondudes if you want to hop on our Discord. We have new episodes coming out every other Tuesday and every Thursday, as always, and we will be back with more Shadows of Drakenheim on August 17th.
Yes. Please check out our Kickstarter if you haven't yet. It's in its final days, and we will see all of you on Friday when we are back to kick off the final moments of our... Will we be live during the ending of the Kickstarter?
It ends at midnight. At midnight.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll be there for the final for the last bit, not all the way to midnight. I like my nappy
That might be
naps.
hard. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll give a nice farewell to our first successful Kickstarter, where we'll thank you all once again. But thank you all for now. I love you all. I love this community. You all are so important to us. So thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time
In the dungeon.
in the dungeon.